Welcome to Mindful Monday, where we explore life's challenges. Let us pause now and listen to what the heart hears. Meet me here. Speak my name. I am not your enemy. I am your teacher. I may even be your friend. Let us tell our truth together, you and I. My name is anger. I say you have been wronged. My name is shame. My story is your hidden pain. My name is fear. My story is vulnerability. My name is resentment. I say things should have been different. My name is grief. My name is depression. My name is anxiety. I have many names and many lessons. I am not your enemy. I am your teacher. Hi there. Today's May 4th, 2020. This is a part of a continuing series on trauma and the pandemic and how we navigate difficult times, etc. So we're just going to break from what we've been doing recently, and it's going to be more of a teaching moment, a teaching session. The idea of R.A.I.N. is an acronym. We're going to step through the acronym, but first let's talk about what does pandemic, panic, and pandemonium possibly have in common. Just invite you to kind of check in with yourself, with your experience so far. The pandemic's been announced now for, I think, going on 2 months. We're getting close to it. We've certainly been knowing that it was spreading across other countries and maybe coming to the United States is going all the way back into January and February. So this is a new experience for us. For most of us that are alive now, only a few people still lived through the pandemic back in 1918 around the flu. But the three words there, pandemic, panic, and pandemonium, they certainly all start with the same three letters, a P-A-N. Not exactly the same root words to those words, but some of them do share the same root word. Pan in pandemic represents all, and the demic part actually translates the etymology going back in the Greek. Etymology represents people. So in other words, all people. And the way pandemic differs from an epidemic is that it's now spread out. And so here we are in the United States experiencing a pandemic around the coronavirus. But what comes with that? So it's spread out. Well, what's bringing with it, and what we've been talking about for the last several weeks now, is the anxieties, the fears, the concerns, the worries that most of us are feeling. I sense it once in a while, my own concerns and worries and anxieties, and they cover many aspects. If you're watching this, if you've checked in to watch it, very likely something is going on in your world also where things are being difficult. Some troubling emotions might be coming up. Maybe difficult, challenging emotions are showing up. And that is the essence of it. We're not alone. Practically everyone that is experiencing the pandemic is also noticing some level of anxiety. It's a new one. The panic. Panic's not necessary. Panic oftentimes is associated with anxieties. And so we don't want to be in panic oftentimes. But again, the root word of panic actually does date back into the Greek times, but it's not the same root as the pan in pandemic. But it does still bring up some fears and that sort of thing. And then pandemonium. Again, the pan of pandemonium, when we see something's in pandemonium, there seems to be some upset, some distress, some chaos. Could be a group of people, ourselves, we can be in pandemonium. In the root word for that also is all, but it's also related to fear. So all three of those words are related to fear somehow. So that's what we're going to be talking about is fear, not the pandemic so much, not the panic, not the pandemonium. We're going to be talking about the fear and what happens when it shows up. And often when it shows up, it comes into the alert systems in the body. So that really is what we're going to be talking about as we move through this. We're going to tease out R.A.I.N, the acronym of it, and just kind of see where we go with that. One of the things that there's not a slide here for it. We're not going to show words up on the screen. We'll probably do a deeper dive into the aspects of fear, all the different qualities of it, how it shows up in the body. But many of us may hear of when we go into a fear response, we go into fight or flight. We're going to look at some of that here in this video. But there's other aspects of it too. There's fight, flight, freeze, submit, collapse, feign. There's some various other qualities when the fear response shows up in the body. And some researchers might even suggest that naming it as fear is actually giving it a construct where the sensations in the body are biological responses to what's going on around us and within us. So the body doesn't necessarily have a name, but we certainly are quite capable of sending a thought down from the brain, down into the body, say, this is scary, and then the body will fall in line with us and give us the appropriate body response. So we kind of talked about that last Thursday around Thoughtful Thursday. And if you haven't watched that, go ahead and look at the link that'll be included in the description down below. So fear is associated with a sense of safety. When we sense safe, fear can be present, but it tends to calm and soothe fairly easily. When we move from being safe into being challenged in some way, and many things that we encounter in life are challenging. They're not always super simple. Oftentimes when I've worked with people individually or in groups, and I ask, I'll get reports back from that almost anything that they've done worthwhile in their life was challenging, whether it's coming into a particular career path, moving through elementary school, junior high, high school, maybe college, or just doing what they really enjoy. If it's given them some sense of joy and pleasure, it was also challenging. And the rewards usually start to come when we meet things that are challenging. But then what happens when they're overwhelming? And overwhelm will almost always be attached somehow to some sort of a fear state within the body, to where we aren't able to think straight. We may have too much emotion present to engage. We may collapse. We may want to run away. We may want to fight. There's a variety of things that start coming up, responses, reactions that start coming up when we shift into overwhelm. And oftentimes after the fact, we don't like it. We can name it after the fact. But when overwhelm's present, we certainly start to become aware that we're not performing the way we would really like to engage with whatever's present in that moment. And it won't matter. It doesn't matter whether it's interpersonal relationship with our loved ones or something that's going on at work, out in the community. Those of you that are first responders certainly know that overwhelm's not welcome if you're engaged in doing your job. But even when our loved ones move into overwhelm, our kids, our significant others at home, things very typically aren't going well. And when overwhelm starts to calm down, moving back toward challenge and safe, things are going a little bit smoother. So, but there's in the video that I mentioned earlier on Thursday, Thoughtful Thursday, there's a lot of discussion in that video about the window of tolerance. A window of tolerance, in essence, is what can we handle? And again, I invite you to look at that video. But what gets in the way of us coming back into our window of tolerance? When we're overwhelmed, we're outside our tolerance zones. Several years ago, I was at a training with a bunch of other therapists, and I met a woman who previously had been a medic up in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area. And then she decided that she wanted to be a therapist. And we were having lunch. We were talking about the content of the class. We'd been hearing about the window of tolerance and what that's like and how difficult it can be, what shows up in the body and stuff. And she described some of her own experiences that I also related to from some of my experiences of when I knew I was outside my window of tolerance. And she says it's almost like walking on a pipe, and she's either outside it too much, she's too elevated, has too much excitement going on, or she's below it, and she goes right around, misses the inside of the pipe, and now she's tired, depressed, detached, apathetic, and just not wanting to do anything, not wanting to engage. It's a disengagement. It's a form of collapse. And I go, yeah, what an amazing thing. But what happens is that pipe starts to collapse on us. It gets smaller and smaller and smaller, so that if it's wide enough and we can find it, but what happens when it gets as small as like a thread of spaghetti, and we don't tolerate much at all? Any little bit of excitement shoots us up above and we're blasting through the roof, or you take that away and then we're just feeling like we're depressed or detached, and lots of hard emotions like a sense of hopelessness and helplessness and worthless start showing up. So there's a lot of things that come with the window of tolerance. So what gets in the way of it? There's a list here of just a few things that might get in the way of the window of tolerance, and could be resistance to fear. Oftentimes it's what we're taught, what we learn, the beliefs that we have that we're not supposed to be afraid, that fear is not supposed to be here, yet the body's sending us a fear signal. That could be getting in the way. Empathic distress. Each of these have the ability for us to have a video of its own, but empathic distress is we may even start to feel a fear state inside the body when we're sitting with somebody else's emotional upset. And with first responders, that's not unusual at all. That is actually a characteristic, a trait that help first responders do their job, is to shut off from the empathy and to be very matter of fact, to treat the patient, not feel what the patient's feeling. For police officers, same thing with when they're interacting with victims and interviewing victims. But as humans, we are wired to feel empathy. We are wired to feel what the other person's feeling. We see it in the faces. We see it in the eyes and in the facial expressions. We'll hear it in the voice. But that also can be overwhelming. It can be overwhelming to allow ourselves to be too empathetic with those that we're out working with, or with the people around us, our coworkers, when our coworkers are struggling. We tremendously want to reach in and do something to make that go away, and we can't. And that in itself can be overwhelming for us also. Wanting things to be different than what they are. What is here, and this starts getting into the things that we can control and that we can't control. But once something's already happened and we wished it had been different, that can start to bring up its whole set of fear conditions within the body then. Typically along with it comes stories that we tell ourselves and about ourselves and those sort of things. But there's a basic element way back a couple hundred years ago. Well, not a couple hundred years ago. Over 100 years ago, William James, one of the founders of modern American psychology, identified that acceptance of things the way they are is one of the foundations of our well-being, or of our emotional well-being. It shows up in many faith beliefs also, but in the science of psychology, right at the foundation of what psychology is if we can be okay with what's here now, even though it's difficult and challenging and maybe painful, maybe sad, maybe joy, maybe excitement and love, we tend to be healthier, mentally and emotionally, and that tends to bring more happiness. But then wanting to control what's not ours to control, that oftentimes also brings up its sense of discomfort within the body, a sense of overwhelm. Again, wanting to take away the pain and suffering of another individual when it's not ours to take away and relieve, can be overly challenging. Seeing too much pain and suffering around the world or within the ones that we care about most also can start to lead to a sense of discomfort within the body. And very frequently, when we lean in toward it, the body's sending us the similar sensations that are associated with a fear response in the body. And then stinking thinking, irrational thoughts, just borrowing that coin phrase from other realms. But the irrationality of some of our thoughts really do. They start challenging what our belief systems are, and can cause quite a bit of challenges for us across the board if we're not familiar with what our thinking patterns are, and are they rational or irrational. We'll probably tease more out about some of these things on the next Thoughtful Thursday and future Thoughtful Thursday episodes. So the reign of fear, what is that? RAIN's an acronym that I've encountered in my mindfulness studies. It's fairly well known in some mindfulness communities as a way to draw our awareness to what's going on. It's very structured, and it can be a helpful way. But it can have a radicalness to it. It can have a hardness to it in itself, especially if we have a fear of turning toward our emotions to begin with. So the R of RAIN is recognize what's here. And since I'm discussing fear right now, it's recognizing that fear is present. And whatever that is, it's more than a word. It's, how do we know that it's here? And we're going to step through some of that. It's a lot of times the first signs of it is going to be whatever's showing up in the body. And this isn't an all-inclusive list here, but noticing that this can be within us or it can be within somebody else. Those of you that are working within the public safety, working out in the field, the police officers might encounter this in victims, in other people that they encounter. Firefighters and medics might be seeing it in the patients that they're showing up to work with and to rescue. Trembling and shaking as a result of whatever is going on. But it can also happen within our families, and it can happen within us when either we recall something from the past and it shows up and here comes trembling and shaking, or when we're reminded of something that comes up. Numbing and dazed. These start to be indicators sometimes that there might be dissociation present. But numbing and dazing, whatever that might look like. Deer in the headlights kind of a look. It's like, many of us may have seen it, that the term deer in the headlights is just this fixed gaze, a vacant stare, 1,000-yard stare. There's a lot of different words that start to describe it when it's present. But if we're sensing it within ourselves, we may just find that we're gazing off into the distance, not really seeing anything and looking, but we are looking out into the distance. Or numbing. One of the questions I've been asked before in many settings is numbing the same as not feeling? It might be different. If you think of the times when you've gone to maybe the dentist and had the Novocaine shot while they're drilling or pulling or whatever they're doing in the mouth, they may numb it, but we can still be aware of it. We can even reach up and palpate it. We don't feel pain, but we sense something. There's some sense of some sensation. Not the same as not feeling anything. Both of those can be important to notice, and if these are somehow associated with reminders of some sort of a traumatic event. The wanting to run is an indicator that, fight or flight. Yeah, so that's a signal to us that something within us wants to get out of here. We want to leave. We want to haul ass. So wanting to run can be a sign that we're moving into a fear state. Mobilized to fight, however that shows up. There's the fight response. Collapsed or helpless is a sign that we're moving into a fear state. Armoring or moving into on guard, and then an urge to pull back or pull away. Not unlike, it's almost like we just want to suck into ourselves, or we might even want to slink back into our chair or into our seat and move away from something. So it's another fear response that's showing up in the body. Then the A of RAIN is acknowledging what is present. We've recognized something's here. Well, maybe I want to pull back or pull away, or maybe I'm noticing I want to fight something, or I want to run away from something, or my body's just shaking. I don't know why, but my body's trembling. And it's not diet related. It's not because of low blood sugar or something. It could be something, okay, well, maybe it's because I was thinking of something. Something just reminded me of something. One of the challenges is there's not always a coherent thought that goes with it. We just know that we're experiencing these things coming up out of the body. So acknowledging that it's present, here it is the beginning then of, okay, well, what do I do with it? So I'm going to walk through each one of these and just give a couple of examples of how we can acknowledge it. And while it's here, so just say, oh, I'll sigh or take a deep breath. We do that all day long, and it's actually something that the body needs. It needs that, fills the lungs with oxygen and air, and to release it. Sometimes that's enough when with the trembling and shaking. It's just, oh, I'm trembling and shaking. It's not going to be magical, but it is acknowledging and accepting that it's here, and then we're just going to do something to engage with it. Numbing and dazed, we can ground. We can, with intention, find our feet pressing onto the ground or into the floor. We can find our buttocks pressing on the chair. We can shift our gaze out into the area out around us with intention. If we're dazed and we're just gazing off into the distance without any awareness, we pull our awareness back, and now we start looking at things around us. We can look at things that have shape or color or textures. We can start looking for things that have a rectangular shape, a shiny surface, a glossy surface, a rough surface, specific colors. We can name a color to ourselves and start looking for it in our environment. Various sorts of ways of, with awareness, guiding our attention out away from us, out into our environment in a way that is safe, not threatening. In grounding is finding the buttocks pressing into the chair, noticing the back of the seat pressing on the back or the body pressing down into the seated position or into the ground, noticing gravity and those sorts of things, the heaviness of the body. All ways of grounding, all ways of drawing our attention into what's going on now. And wanting to run, lengthening the spine doesn't mean we have to get up and run, because oftentimes running and leaving what the situation is isn't useful. If one of the most common forms of anxiety is public speaking, very often people that have it to do, whether it's in a classroom setting or whether it's giving a speech before 15, 20, 30 people, 100 people, 1,000 people, we set the intention we're going to do it anyway, but we've got this urge to want to run. We can just take a lengthen the spine, sitting up straight, sitting in a dignified posture, standing in a posture of dignity, maybe pulling the shoulders back, allowing the chest to rise up. Sends a signal to the body of strength and confidence. And as we do that, we can honor, and then we notice, okay, well, I want to run, but I'm not going to run. That's more thought patterns, but sending a signal to the body that it's good, that it's safe right now. That, yeah, we're going to go into a posture of dignity and strength versus one of slouching and leaning forward, kind of like what I'm doing now. For mobilized to fight, slowing the pace, regulating the breathing. One of the other videos that we've posted on the channel has to do with box breathing. And it's a way of counting the breath, the in and outs, and holding it at the top and the bottom, at the in breath and out the out breath. It tends to slow it down. There's another video posted using the stop analogy of stop, think, observe, or stop, take a breath, observe, and then proceed. It's all about slowing things down. There's many others. When I've worked in the hospital setting, catch it, check it, change it. It's a technique we teach to young kids to catch their thoughts, check them, and then change them. And it gives them a space, counting to 10. There's a lot of different ways to slow things down a little bit so that we don't have to fight, and we can notice where that's showing up. collapse and helpless, when that's in entering the awareness, when we've acknowledged that we are moving into collapse and helplessness, it's making a movement of some sort. It doesn't take much. A couple little things. One is like a fidget spinner. Some of you may have seen something like this. They were very popular a couple years ago in schools. The schools were confiscating them from the students. But just playing around with it, giving movement does not take a lot of movement in the body for the movement to start to say, okay, well, I'm not collapsed. I'm not helpless. I can move. Another one might be playing around with something like a slinky. Collect this off the display table at a conference around trauma and stress. It's just a little tiny slinky. When I was a kid, I used to play with these. Very old kind of a toy. They're still around. My grandkids love them. But again, it gives us movement. Doesn't take a lot in the hand. We can do things like get up and walk around the room, go get a drink of water. There's a lot of things we can do to bring movement into the body. But another one that works well is to do some self-catch with a ball. If there's somebody present with you, maybe even tossing something like a ball across the room, or a soft object like a pillow or something like that. It brings movement into the body, and it gives us a sense of relief and calm back into the body, even though that there might be an excitement that comes with it. Often when I've worked with somebody individually, sitting in the office, tossing a pillow back and forth across the therapy room, inevitably, no matter how deep and dark and how much despair or depression might have been present, there's a lightness that starts to come on, and a smile starts to creep onto the face in those moments when the body was moving in, the body and the psyche was moving into collapse and helplessness. Sounds overly simplistic. This isn't a therapy type of a practice. This is stuff that we all have the ability to do for ourselves in any given moment of upset and distress that we're moving into. Then when we're sense that we're armoring or we're moving into on guard, it's kind of exaggerating our responses. I mean, I tend to talk with my hands anyway, and here they're going off screen a little bit just because of the way I'm using the technology here. But we can exaggerate it. We can. Right now, I'm thinking of the movie Elf, when Elf starts singing. And he's singing everything just to make himself happier. And he's elongating the tones of his voice and the sounds, and he's really exaggerating his expressions and stuff. This can start to help lower our inner defenses a little bit for ourselves so that we can be with whatever's showing up. And lastly, that sense of wanting to pull back or pushing away. In one of the future videos that we'll be talking about, I'll be teasing out a theory that starts describing our fear responses and stuff. And that researcher, evolutionarily, he takes us back and he says our closest evolutionary space on the evolutionary chart is to a turtle. And as odd as that sounds, it's like, okay, a turtle. Well, but turtles pull into their shells, and it shows up in our language. It shows up in just the normal way we describe things around the globe. Come out of your shell, man. We're seeing somebody that they're starting to withdraw. They're starting to turn into themselves. Or we'll even notice it. We'll feel like we want to just kind of hide in a shell and not come out. So to be able to notice these things, that, okay, well, one of the ways to move out of this end is to just practice a clenching and unclenching. You can do it with the jaw. You can just clench the jaw and then release it. You can do it with the hands. An exercise is just make a fist and hold it and clench and clench. And then with awareness, gradually open, release, unclench, relax, relax. I'm holding them up in front of me. Normally I do this out in front of me and just allow them to rest on the lap. Clench and release, unclench. We can do it with the cheeks of the buttocks. Just tighten each cheek, alternate left, right, left, right. We can make little fists with our toes, little toe fists, and release them. There's a lot of ways that we can draw awareness to the body and clenching and releasing to let the body know that we've got it. We're here with it, and just move in and out of that urge to wanting to pull back and pull away. So there's a summary of the responses. This is available on the Focus website, which is listed down at the bottom of the page there. You can go in and you can download all of these and spend some time with them if it's useful. So we've recognized it, we've acknowledged and accepted that whatever's here is here. Now the I of R.A.I.N is the investigation. It can be even more useful than to say, okay, well, now that I know that it's here, what can I learn about it? And we're going to walk through three layers of kind of a form of questioning that you can do for yourself, or you can do, say one of your youngsters at home are going through something difficult, and they've been able to acknowledge it and maybe go through that it's here and everything, but then what? And this is where the real change starts to emerge for us, is that we can tune into it and we can notice that our experiences show up in some sort of an order. And I find that this triangle is a useful model. It's way overly simplistic, but thoughts, emotions, and body sensations, those three things interact and they affect the way our actions and our behaviors play out. So when we're noticing that we're moving into some sort of an overwhelm, it can be useful for us to investigate and say, what was I aware of? What was I aware of first? Was it a thought that came on board and then I started moving into overwhelm? Or was it a body sensation? Was there some sort of an emotion that I knew that I was experiencing? What came first? And then what? And then what? And oftentimes we start to find that there's an order to it, that there's a and it's not always the same. It'll be unique for each of us, but it's not always the same even for our momentary experiences. Sometimes it's a thought that'll generate it, and oftentimes it might have come up through the body. The sensations are here now, but the memory is about something out of the past. It's not happening now. So this is why we turn toward the body and pay attention to the body, because the body will always be in the present moment. If we have a body sensation going on, it's not a past one, it's not a future sensation, it's here now. Whether it's a breath, a tightness, a trembling, urge to withdraw, it's all here now. And that can be useful for us to tease out those differences. So layer 2, being able to check out what showed up first, a thought, an emotion, a body sensation, okay, and what was next. We start to find out that there's an interaction. Then we move into layer 2. We can start asking ourselves a variety of questions around our experience, whether it's around the emotions and the body sensations that are present, and doing an investigation, taking our time with it. How might this sensation be different than other times that I've experienced it? Have I experienced this before? Is it familiar? What about the emotion that's coming with it? How do I know what the emotion is? Oftentimes teasing out that the body's sending us an elevated heart rate and muscles are tensing and blood pressure is going up and breathing's changing, and we call that excitement. And other times we have similar sensations, but we name it as fear. So it's like, okay, well, isn't that interesting? We can have the same sensations in the body, but have two different experiences for it. So being able to figure out which it is, and if it's familiar, do we tend to... Oftentimes we'll have a default pattern that we'll go to. Have the sensations and have the emotions been useful in the past? And this is where we can really start pausing, calming. We've grounded, or we've tossed the ball around, or maybe even fiddling with it while we're doing this. We can, this is a squeezy ball. I can do all sorts of things with it. We can investigate. Has this sensation ever been useful? Are there times where it wasn't useful, but it showed up anyway? What was I able to do with it when it was present before? We can sit with it and just kind of tease it out and investigate how it's been useful. In a question I like to ask myself once in a while, if it's really becoming difficult, or that as I'm guiding classes or when I was doing therapy, and I'd ask somebody, if the sensation had words, what would it want to tell you? What would it need you to know? And we're quite capable of turning toward our own experiences and investigating, saying, I am telling myself something. There's a part of me that needs me to know something else, like be careful, or hey, this is fun and exciting, or don't do that. Last time you did that, it didn't work out well. And it can kind of be like the little Jiminy Cricket sitting up on the shoulder, warning Pinocchio about things that are about to come, or about decisions we're about ready to make. So being able to pause and asking ourselves some questions about the experiences, about the sensations, are different than saying, I don't want them to be here, I want them to go away. It's like, well, they're here. And just like the opening poem, they might have a lesson to teach us if we pause and allow them to teach, so that we can learn from them. So now we're moving into layer 3. This is all under the investigation part of R.A.I.N. Layer 3 is a different layer of questioning. We looked at how familiar the sensations and the emotions and the experiences might be, if they've ever been useful in the past. But now it's like, okay, well, how might this help us stay well? I know all this stuff. I've experienced this before. I've had it before. I've had something similar. It's here now. I think I know what might have brought it on, whether it was a trigger or not. It's like, well, what is that? And we can say, okay, well, now that I know this, how can I use it? Can it be useful for me? Maybe it's not useful. Maybe I need to get up and go for a walk, give myself a break. Maybe I need to withdraw. Maybe I need to run. Which is different than just moving into it and being on autopilot and kicking somebody's rear end, or breaking something, or flying off the handle, throwing something across the room. But when we do it with intention, we just toss things around and bring muscle movement in to give the body what it's needing. Often that's enough. So these 3 questions kind of interact with each other. How might this help you reduce your reaction to stress? Stress is inevitable. It's part of life. We got to have it. It's like, okay, well, there's eustress, there's distress, and then there's stress. Which kind is this? How do I know? So being able to notice that. And then also, how might this contribute to your sense of well-being? When it's around traumas that have already been triggered, and oftentimes our current experiences can activate and bring on an experience coming up out of the body that is familiar from the past, but it's happening now as a result of something that's in our environment right now, whether it's a word somebody says to us, an action that we hear, seeing something on the news, is activating prior traumas, past traumas. That's how these investigations of moving through R.A.I.N. can be useful, is investigating the familiarity of it. Say, it's here, it's back now. The thing is that one happened a long time ago, or it happened last month, or it happened 15 or 20 years ago, or 30 years ago. But the idea of trigger, but recognize that it's our trigger, it's our ammunition. We can adopt a responsibility, say, well, I can, with awareness, I know when my ammunition's out and available to explode. I know when it's not. I know when it's tucked away up on the shelf, in a safe, whatever. I know when it's not even loaded into what's going on. So noticing that the idea of a trigger is like, it's our trigger, it's our ammo that goes off. So then it's like, okay, well, then it's up to us to do something with it. And this is one model that helps us navigate through it. So the N of R.A.I.N. is simply nurture. Another variation of this might be not to overly identify with what's going on, but certainly nurture. Everything we've been discussing so far is around turning toward the body, the emotions that are coming with it, the thoughts that are coming with it, but nurturing, giving the body what it needs. And sometimes it's simply just enough to take a couple breaths and invite it to relax. Sometimes it's to get up and go for a walk, or to do something. But it can also be something more present focused. It can be giving the body a soothing touch. activating certain aspects of the body to send a signal back to the body that you've got it, that it's safe now. And one of those is simply placing a hand up on the chest. I like to use two hands sometimes, finding the clavicle and forming a V right here. And in essence, what it does, there's some nerve points here that get triggered by the touch that send the signal up in through one set of cranial nerves, but ultimately get into the vagus nerve and send a signal down to the rest of the body to say, to relax. So I invite you to just practice that, and maybe find in the chest and two hands even, and just taking a breath with that. That long breath, that long sigh activates the parasympathetic nervous system and sends a signal to restore and to relax into the body. Another thing that we can do, similar things, these are all directly engaging with the body, with ourselves, is we can take the right hand, come in under the left armpit, and then wrap around, and we give ourselves a hug. Just invite you to do it, and just kind of give yourself your own little hug. Not the same as getting a hug from another individual, but it does start to activate sensations into the body so that you've got it and it's contained. Again, it also activates the vagus nerve to send a signal down to the body to restore and to relax. Another one that works wonderfully, I don't have one available for me right now, but would be to take a pillow and just embrace a pillow. You pull it into the chest and give the pillow a hug, and oftentimes it sends a signal of calm and soothe and relax to the body. These may sound super simple, but they're available to us, and absent the pillow, is giving ourselves a self hug, doing this, and some of you may be familiar when you're watching a singer perform on TV or at a concert or somewhere. They frequently will put a hand over the chest while they're singing a moving, emotional song and whatnot. There's a lot to this. It's right over the heart, sends a signal into the heart, but also up to the vagus nerve to calm, soothe, and relax. Another one, recognizing that with the conditions out in the environment the way they are now, we're getting guidance to wash our hands frequently and not to touch our face. But once you're inside the areas of your sanctity of your own home or your own environment that you do have control over as to whether or not it's been sanitized and clean, is coming up and giving a soothing touch to the face, the muscles right around the eyes, very fine muscles. And you may be familiar with this with an infant that's crying. Mothers will often reach up and just soothe the baby's face, and the baby will start to soothe. The same thing of caressing it, come down across the face, and chances are many of us do this throughout the day anyway. I just want to bring on that layer of awareness that if you're going to do it now, when you know your hands have been washed and clean and sanitized, and that you're in an environment that is clean and sanitized to your comfort zone. Otherwise, that awareness also is many of the skills that I'm rolling out for you right now are also through social distancing are being pulled back from us. The ability to touch and hug somebody is being removed from us, and that in itself can start sending harsh sensations into our own body of not being connected. So it is another form of a fear response. So with all that, we're going to stop for now. I recognize this is a longer talk, but hopefully you may find it useful at some point. And if you do find it useful, I invite you to hit the subscribe button and also ring the bell down below. And other than that, I wish you well, and I'll be talking to you again soon.